I woke up to my phone buzzing on the hotel nightstand. Singapore had been exhausting but successful, and all I wanted now was to see my childhood home. That house was all I had left of my father, my sanctuary, my inheritance. The text from Mom seemed innocent enough, but then came the words that shattered everything. Frank sold the house. No warning, no discussion, just gone. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. Where would I go now to feel close to Dad? Tell me where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button while I share how I dealt with my stepfather selling my childhood home from under me. My father Daniel was everything to me. We were inseparable from the moment I could walk. He taught me to throw a baseball, ride a bike, and fix things around the house. But most importantly, he taught me what integrity looked like. Dad worked as an architect for 30 years designing homes while making our own house truly special. Every corner had his personal touch, from the hand-carved banister to the reading nook in my bedroom, where we spent countless nights exploring worlds through books. When I turned 12, Dad and I planted an oak tree in the backyard. He put his arm around me and said, "This tree will grow with you, Corey. Strong roots, strong branches, just like our family." That tree became our spot for important conversations as I grew up. Dad would sit me down under those branches for talks about schoolgirls and my dreams of becoming a software developer. Our world collapsed when Dad was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer when I was 16. The doctors gave him 6 months, but my fighter of a father held on for almost a year. During those final months, he spent every ounce of his remaining energy making memories with me in our home. We finished projects together, organized photo albums, and had long conversations about life in his study, which remained exactly as he left it after he passed. The house itself was the last physical connection I had to him. Every room held memories I could touch and feel. The small ding in the kitchen doorframe marked my height each birthday. The worn spot on the living room carpet, where we would wrestle. The workshop in the garage, where he taught me to build my first computer. These weren't just walls and floors, they were the physical embodiment of my relationship with my father. Mom struggled after Dad died. Sarah had been married to him for 20 years, and suddenly she was alone, raising a grieving teenage son. I tried to be strong for her, but we were both lost in our own pain. The house became both a comfort and a source of sadness for her, I could tell. 2 years after Dad passed, Mom attended a charity event for cancer research, where she met Frank Thompson. Frank appeared at first like exactly what Mom needed. He was confident, successful, and attentive to her in ways that seemed to bring her back to life. As the owner of Thompson Realty, a mid-size real estate company, he had the financial stability and charm that drew Mom in. When they started dating, he would bring flowers, take her to nice restaurants, and listen to her stories about Dad with what seemed like genuine interest. I was skeptical at first, but seeing Mom smile again made me reconsider. Frank made efforts with me too, inviting me to basketball games and asking about my college plans. He never tried to replace my father, which I appreciated. When I graduated high school, Frank gave me an expensive watch and a card that read, "Your father would be proud of the man you are becoming." It seemed sincere at the time. They married the summer before I started college. The wedding was small, just close family and friends in our backyard, under the oak tree Dad and I had planted. I gave a toast, welcoming Frank to our family, genuinely hoping this new chapter would bring Mom happiness. She deserved it after everything she had been through. It was during my sophomore year of college that I began noticing changes. Frank started making comments about how the house was outdated and too big for just 2 people. He suggested selling it multiple times, but Mom would gently redirect the conversation. When I came home for breaks, I noticed Dad's things slowly disappearing. His workshop tools were sold at a garage sale. His books were donated to the local library. His study became a home office for Frank. When I questioned Mom about these changes, she would say, "Frank thinks we need to move forward," or, "It has been several years, Corey." But I could see the conflict in her eyes. Frank had begun taking control of their finances, too. He convinced Mom to add him to her bank accounts, and to give him power of attorney over most of Dad's assets. "It makes sense for the real estate professional to handle these things," he would say with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. The comments about Dad started subtly. "Daniel never set up a proper retirement plan for Sarah," or "The house has so many problems Daniel never addressed." Each comment chipped away at Dad's memory, and I noticed Mom starting to accept this revised version of her life with my father. The summer after my junior year, when I was 21, I confronted Frank about his plans for the house. We sat in what used to be Dad's study now, filled with Frank's real estate awards and golf trophies. "I know this house means a lot to you," Corey Frank said, leaning back in the chair that used to be my father's. "And I want you to know that this house will always be yours when you need it. Your father wanted that, and so do I, and your mother." He produced a document that outlined his commitment to preserving my inheritance of the house. It stated clearly that any decisions regarding the sale of the property would involve me directly. Mom was there too, nodding along with tears in her eyes. "This house is your birthright, sweetie," she said. "Frank understands that." I signed the paper. Frank signed it. Mom signed as a witness. It was not notarized, which I now realize was the first red flag, but at the time it felt like a meaningful commitment between family members. I trusted them. That was my second mistake. The first was letting Frank into our lives at all. 7 years passed. I graduated with honors in computer science, built a successful career as a software developer, and even purchased my own condo in the city. But that house, my childhood home, remained my emotional anchor. I would visit at least once a month sometimes, just to sit under the oak tree or spend time in what remained of Dad's presence there. This April, my company sent me to Singapore to oversee the implementation of a major software project for a banking client. It was a career-defining opportunity, 3 weeks abroad, working directly with our most important client in Asia. Before leaving, I called Mom to let her know I would stop by the house when I returned, maybe spend a few days there to recover from jet lag. "Of course, honey," she said, her voice sounding strained. "Have a safe trip." Something in her tone bothered me, but I was too busy preparing for the trip to investigate further. That nagging feeling followed me across the Pacific, surfacing occasionally between meetings and during late nights working on code. Something was wrong, but I could not place it. 2 days before my scheduled return, as I was packing my hotel room in Singapore, Mom called. It was 3 in the morning, her time. "Mom, is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned by the unusual hour. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Corey, I needed to tell you before you came home. Frank sold the house." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, he sold the house?" "He cannot do that. We had an agreement. The buyers are a development company. They are planning to demolish it next month for a new subdivision." She was crying now. I tried to stop him, but he said it made financial sense, and the papers were already signed. "Where are my things?" "Dad's things." My voice was rising, panic setting in. "In storage. Frank hired movers yesterday. I saved what I could, but it all happened so fast." I canceled my remaining meetings, booked the next flight home, and spent the 14-hour journey in a haze of rage and disbelief. How could he do this? How could she let him? The house was not just property. It was the last physical space where I felt connected to my father. Instead of going to my condo, I took a taxi straight to Mom and Frank's new address, a luxury townhouse near the country club. It was nearly midnight when I pounded on their door, but I did not care. Frank answered, still dressed in golf clothes, a drink in his hand. "Corey, we were not expecting you until tomorrow." I pushed past him into their pristine living room, where Mom sat rigid on an unfamiliar sofa. "How could you do this? That house was mine. We had an agreement." Frank sighed, setting down his glass with theatrical patience. "That house was in Sarah's name, and as her husband, I advised her on the best financial decision. The neighborhood is declining, property taxes were increasing, and that old place needed at least $50,000 in repairs. It was not your decision to make," I shouted, turning to Mom. "How could you let this happen?" Mom could not meet my eyes. "Frank thought it was best. You do not need that house anymore." Frank interrupted, shrugging as if we were discussing something trivial like changing a dinner reservation. You have your own place, a good job. That house was just sitting there, a financial drain and an emotional anchor keeping you tied to the past. That was not for you to decide. I said, my voice dropping dangerously low. Frank's expression hardened. Well, it is done now. Westbrook Development made a fair offer. The papers are signed, and the money is in the bank. He emphasized the last part, and I noticed Mom flinch. What money? Where is it? I demanded. In our investment account, Frank said. We can discuss giving you a portion, though you really should be past needing handouts at your age. That is when I noticed the new watch on his wrist, the luxury brand golf bag by the door, and Mom's tense, unhappy expression. The pieces clicked into place. You are having money. Problems are not you, I said, the realization dawning. That is why you really sold it. Not because it was best for anyone but you. Frank's face reddened. You do not know what you are talking about. That agreement we signed, where is it? I asked Mom. She looked at Frank, who laughed dismissively. That little paper. That was not a legally binding document, just a family discussion. Besides, circumstances change. I felt something break inside me. 7 years of tolerating this man, for my mother's sake, of swallowing my doubts and suspicions, erupted into pure rage. That was my father's house, I shouted. Everything I had left of him was there. The tree we planted his. Study the memories that kept him alive for me, and you sold it to developers who will bulldoze it all without a second thought. Mom was crying silently now. I am sorry, Corey. I should have stopped him. Yes, you should have, I said, my voice breaking. Dad would never have let someone erase you like this. Frank stepped between us. That is enough. What is done is done. You need to accept it and move on. Stop living in the past. I stared at this man who had methodically dismantled my father's legacy piece by piece, at my mother who had allowed it to happen. The betrayal cut so deep I could hardly breathe. Without another word, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. In my car, I screamed and pounded the steering wheel until my voice was raw and my hands ached. Then, when the initial wave of emotion passed, a strange calm settled over me. This was not over. Not by a long shot. I drove to a 24-hour diner, where Samuel and I used to study in high school. I needed a familiar place somewhere that held good memories. I called Samuel, despite the late hour. He had been my best friend since 3rd grade, and was now an attorney at a respected law firm in the city. Frank did what Samuel said when I explained the situation. That has to be illegal, Corey. The house was your inheritance. We had an agreement, but it was not legally binding, I admitted. But something does not feel right about this whole thing. Frank mentioned Westbrook Development. Do you know anything about them? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Westbrook is a major player. They have been buying up properties all over the county for a new commercial and residential development. There have been some rumors about their business practices, but nothing concrete. Can you help me look into the sale? There has to be something I can do. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring any documents you have related to the house, even if they are just personal letters or emails. We will figure this out. That night I stayed at Samuel's guest room, too angry to face my empty condo. The next morning, we met his friend Jordan for breakfast. Jordan worked as a financial analyst and had connections throughout the local business community. Westbrook and Thompson Realty have done several deals together, Jordan said, scrolling through his phone. In fact, Frank has been their exclusive agent on at least 6 properties in the last year. Is that unusual, I asked? For properties of this value? Yes. Typically, developers this size work with multiple agencies to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Jordan looked up from his phone. And here is something interesting. The sale price on your childhood home was significantly below market value, almost 20% less than comparable properties in the area. Why would Frank sell it for less than it is worth? Samuel wondered. Unless he got something on the side, Jordan suggested. Look, I know some people at the county recorder's office. Let me see what I can find out about this transaction. Over the next 48 hours, we dug into every aspect of the sale. Jordan discovered that Frank had received a substantial consultant fee from Westbrook, paid to a separate LLC he had created just 3 months earlier. Samuel found that the sale violated the terms of my father's will, which had stipulated that the house should pass directly to me upon my mother's death, or remarriage, with her retaining lifetime residence rights. Frank would have known about this provision, Samuel said. It would have been in the paperwork when your mom added him to the deed. He deliberately concealed this from you. Even more damning, we discovered Frank had been in serious financial trouble. His real estate business was struggling, and he had taken out several high-interest loans to cover personal expenses and gambling debts. The sale of my childhood home had been a desperate move to avoid bankruptcy. With all this information in hand, I drafted an email with Samuel's help. We addressed it to the State Real Estate Commission, the IRS, the County Prosecutor's Office, and the CEO of Westbrook Development. We attached documentation of the fraudulent sale, the violation of my father's will, the undermarket valuation, and Frank's undisclosed consultant fee. But before sending it, I wanted to give Frank one last chance, a courtesy he had never extended to me. I returned to their townhouse the next evening. Frank answered the door with a scowl. "What do you want now? Come to apologize for your outburst." "No, Frank. I came to understand why you really sold my father's house." Mom appeared behind him, looking exhausted. "Corey, please. Can we talk about this calmly? That is why I am here," I said, my voice steady. "I just want to know the truth." We sat in their living room, the tension thick enough to cut. I looked Frank directly in the eyes. "Are you having financial problems? Is that why you sold the house?" His face flushed with anger. "My finances are none of your business. They became my business when you sold my inheritance to cover your debts." Frank stood up, pointing at me. "You ungrateful little. I have supported your mother for years, while you were off building your fancy tech career. That house was a financial burden we could not afford to keep, so you admit it was about money. Your money problem specifically," I pressed. "Frank." "Please," Mom interjected. "Just tell him the truth." After a moment of tense silence, Frank's shoulders slumped. "Fine. Thompson Realty has been struggling. The market turned, and I made some investments that did not pan out. But this was a smart business decision that benefited everyone. Except me," I said quietly. "And except Mom, who wanted to honor Dad's wishes." Frank sneered. "Your father has been dead for 10 years. It is time to let go." I stood up, surprising myself with my calmness. "Thank you for your honesty, Frank. That is all I needed to know." As I walked out, I smiled slightly, which seemed to confuse him. In my car, I opened my laptop, attached all the evidence we had gathered, and sent the email we had prepared. Then I turned off my phone, drove to Samuel's cabin in the mountains, and waited. 72 hours later, I turned my phone back on to find 37 missed calls from Frank, 15 from Mom, and dozens of increasingly desperate text messages. "Please call me immediately. We need to talk. You do not know what you have done. I can fix this if you just call me back." I called Mom first. She answered on the first ring. "Corey, thank God. Where have you been? Everything is falling apart here. What is happening?" I asked, though I already knew. "Westbrook canceled the sale and is demanding Frank return their deposit plus interest. The Real Estate Commission has suspended his license pending an investigation. The IRS is looking into his business." Her voice broke. "What did you do?" I exposed the truth, Mom. "Frank sold my inheritance illegally to cover his gambling debts and took a kickback in the process." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "He told me we needed the money for retirement. I never knew about the gambling or the side deal with Westbrook." She paused. "He lied to me too, Corey. I will be home tomorrow. We can talk then." When I arrived at their townhouse the next day, Frank looked like a different man. Gone was the arrogant, dismissive attitude. His face was haggard, his hands shaky. "You have to call them off," he said as soon as I walked in. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I will lose everything, Corey. Like I lost my father's house, I countered. The home that was legally mine, according to his will. I can get the house back, he said quickly. Westbrook has not started demolition yet. I can make it right. Mom sat beside me on the couch, no longer next to Frank. I have left him, Corey. I am staying with Aunt Jean for now. Frank looked panicked. Sarah, please. We can work this out. I studied the man who had systematically erased my father's presence from our lives, who had manipulated my mother, and stolen my inheritance. Part of me wanted to see him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but another part remembered what Dad always said. The measure of a man is not in how he punishes his enemies, but in how he chooses justice over vengeance. Here is what is going to happen, I said calmly. You will transfer all rights to the house back to me immediately. You will return every penny of the sale proceeds. You will write a formal letter, admitting what you did and apologizing to both me and Mom. And if I do all that, Frank asked, a glimmer of hope in his eyes, then I will not press criminal charges. I will tell the Real Estate Commission that I do not wish to pursue further action, though that decision ultimately rests with them. But your dealings with Westbrook and the IRS are your own to resolve. Frank nodded frantically. Yes, anything. Thank you, Corey. Do not thank me, I said. I am not doing this for you. I am doing it because spending years watching you face consequences would keep you in our lives. And frankly, we have had enough of you. Within a week, the house was legally mine again. The sale to Westbrook was voided due to the fraudulent nature of the transaction. Frank faced significant financial penalties and the likely permanent loss of his real estate license, but avoided criminal prosecution. Mom filed for divorce and moved into a small apartment near my condo. The healing between us was slow and painful. There were difficult conversations about why she had allowed Frank to take control, why she had not protected Dad's legacy, and why she had chosen silence over standing up for me. I was afraid of being alone, she admitted during one tearful conversation. After losing your father, the thought of conflict or disappointing someone I depended on was too frightening. I know that is no excuse. It took time, but gradually we rebuilt our relationship. She helped me restore the house, cleaning out the changes Frank had made and reinstating elements that Dad had designed. We replanted flowers in Mom's old garden and built a bench under the oak tree that Dad and I had planted all those years ago. The house became a healing space again. I kept my condo, but spent weekends at the family home. Sometimes Mom would join me, and we would cook Dad's recipes or watch his favorite old movies. Other times I would sit in his restored study, feeling his presence in the books he loved and the desk where he had drawn his architectural plans. One evening, sitting under the oak tree that had now grown tall and strong, I realized something profound. The house itself was just a structure of wood and stone. The real inheritance my father left me was the capacity to stand up for what is right, to protect what matters, and to choose justice with mercy, even when vengeance would be easier. I understood now why that house had meant so much to me. It was not just the physical connection to Dad, but the values he had instilled in me while we lived there together. Those values would remain with me, no matter where I lived. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who betrayed your trust? What would you have done in my situation? Leave a comment below and let me know. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about facing betrayal with dignity and strength. And if you know someone dealing with family conflict or betrayal, share this video with them. It might give them the courage they need. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the greatest strength is not in fighting back, but in knowing exactly when and how to take a stand.